Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We're an open dialogue on culture and ideas with a particular focus on education and the arts and social change. And today we are in the heart of the East Village on East 13th Street in the former office and home of Allen Ginsberg, one of the great beat poets, one of the great cultural figures of our time. And we're with Mr. Bob Rosenthal, who was Allen Ginsberg's dear friend and private secretary. And he has a book out called Straight Around Allen, on the business of being Allen Ginsberg. He is currently on tour with this book, and we are so delighted to welcome you to our show today, Bob, at a time when we are, with our TV show, increasingly concerned about what we call the dumbing down of America, and we look to see who the President of the United States is. And I myself am an English professor and a writer, so having you on is like having a kid in a candy store, because we love literature, and you're a literary man. So this is really going to be sort of a rambling literary discourse, and see where it may. And you've taught also.
I have a lot of thoughts about teaching.
Wonderful. So there's no rush.
And I found that after Allen died, that teaching was the closest analogy to working for Allen, because it's about sharing. It's about encouraging others to grow, and nurturing, and helping. And kids, as you know, today need help thinking, reading, everything. They don't, it goes right back to not reading much, and but not knowing how to think, not trusting their own thoughts, and that's something we can talk about maybe later. But
yes. And the other night on Channel 13 there was a biography. There was a show about Woodstock, and we saw all of these young people gathered up in the woods there. 400,000 of them, peace and love. And one of the statistics we like to talk about on our show is that back in the 60s, 1 in 5 young people studied the humanities in college, philosophy, literature, history. Now that number is 1 in 20. The most popular major is business. So think about Allen Ginsberg. Think about his who he was, what he represented in terms of that countercultural energy, and why do you think he matters so much? Why has he emerged as such a popular figure even today?
One word: candor. This is Allen's whole life is built up on candor, and in the 50s, when there was a miasma of false images, whether it was Leave It to Beaver, right, or even Dobie Gillis, the prototype beat, and we learned what was really happening in society, what was happening on the west side of Chicago, what's happening in Bed-Stuy, what's happening in the South, and all that is going to come out in the 60s, of course. But the 50s, President Eisenhower had deliberately confused people about the difference between fission and fusion. And so it was a time of, not new, certainly continue, about disinformation. And I think Allen is he writes his poems about, he writes the poetry that he thinks he's not allowed to write. And that's what Howell is. Howell is, he gives himself permission to write. He said to himself, I'm not going to show this to anybody. I'm not going to show Daddy, the poet, New Jersey poet, Louis Ginsberg, famous. I'm not going to show Daddy. I'm not going to show anybody. I'm just going to write. And he writes, his poem about all of his friends and their community and their suffering, and of course after he realized maybe I have something, and he does start to show it. But the permission that allowed him to write was that he promised he promised himself he didn't have to show it to anybody, and he gave himself that permission. He had also just met his life love of Peter Orlovsky, so he's also in the throes of his first full-blown adult love affair, and I think that's also makes one powerful in a powerful time. And at that time period, he writes Howell, he writes Supermarket in California, America, all these Sunflower Sutra, all these anthologized, amazing poems. It was all this it was like the floodwaters had opened up and everything came out on the West Coast, and so
What year was this now?
this is 55, 56, and so and of course he knows William Burroughs, he knows Jack Kerouac, he knows all those beat writers. It's not an art movement, it's a candor movement. Burroughs' style is different than Allen's, and Kerouac's is different, and none of them are writing the same way, but they're all using candor in a time when candor is so appreciated because people are recognizing how special it is. And even to this day, no other poetry art movement has equaled it. Not deconstructionalism. It hasn't captured the heart of America, like the Beats were able to. And I'm not putting down the intellectual, disassembly of writing. I think that's very useful, but I also think on a gut level, one needs to tell the truth, and that's what Allen did. And John Ashbery tells the truth all the time. That's his poetry is great. But his candor isn't going to be understood by as many people as Allen's, who's an outsider. He's gay in a time period when it's illegal to be gay, and he's not frightened. He purposely doesn't work so he can't be fired for being gay. Really, literally. In 1959 in Chicago, after he read Howell for the Big Table reading series, a lady reporter said, "Mr. Ginsburg, why is there so much homosexual imagery in your writing?" And he camps it up, and he says it in a lilting fairy voice. "It's because I'm a fairy, madame." Madame, and people are shocked. He's gay? Because not shocked that he's gay, shocked that he says he's gay. The world doesn't open up and swallow him, And that's why Norman Mailer called him the bravest man in America. That's why, because of that unerring sense of candor and truth that Allen had, and for all the time I knew him, and I knew him just the last 20 years of his life, so I certainly didn't know him in those exciting days of his great writings and everything. But I think one of my purposes in writing my memoir about working with Allen is to teach. It's to share what he taught me, how to keep the writer alive in a jail in Ankara, how to find the bodhisattva in everybody, how to, all these little different parts, how to organize an argument, and these are all things that he taught me over time, and I was not a quick learner, but I kind of stuck with it, and I wanted to share the things that he taught me with the evidence of that at the last 20 years of his life were extremely busy. And he was doing lots of social action. He was writing a lot of poetry. And I don't subscribe that after Kaddish his writing falls off. I think a lot of his poetry towards the end of his life is excellent. And at the very end, when his brain is a little addled from the liver, he actually died of liver cancer, but he was writing nursery rhymes. And he actually asked me to bring in my children's copy of Rackham's nursery rhymes, and he was going through it. And he said to me, tell me the story of the little pigs. And I said, well, this little pig went to market. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy ate roast beef. And he said, aha! Something's wrong. He said, pigs don't eat meat. So he changed it to this little pig eats quiche, because pigs do eat meat. But he didn't know that. He figured pigs don't eat meat. So he says, this little pig eats quiche. And so he says, I've improved it. So he's improving nursery rhymes, And some of them are kind of his boyish, his kind of puerile.
Bob, I just wanted to say that I do want to be part of the conversation. This is not a lecture. No. I want to be clear. I am not an interviewer. I want to be clear with the audience too. This is a dialogue. This is a back and forth. I have a friend who watches our show and he tells me, John, you got to get in there. You got to stop the people. You got to be like Charlie Rose. Well, I'm not Charlie Rose, everybody. And this is not Charlie Rose. This is not an interview. This is a dialogue. But I talk a lot about Martin Buber on our show, the great philosopher of dialogue, which is an I-thou experience. So we're going to flow a little bit back and forth. Love this stuff, and I want to just show the book here. This is Straight Around Allen on the Business of Being Allen Ginsburg by Bob Rosenthal. And certainly, Bob, your passion and your enthusiasm for this is amazing. And have you talk a little bit about your teaching? Are you on a lecture tour now? And
No, I mean, I wouldn't mind. I would like to go to colleges, but I'm just sort of getting that going. I taught high school. I taught a private high school for 10 years in the city. And
which school?
Abraham Joshua Heschel High School. And and that was a great experience for me. And I had done some teaching earlier in my life, but like I said before, teaching it was challenging because I had been adjuncting for a while at CUNY.
Yes.
And,
So have I, by the way.
okay, so, and I would have stayed down in the trenches with those kids because they really need help, but I couldn't retire. I couldn't make any money doing that. So I got the full-time job at the high school so I could get my Social Security going. And also I figured children of the rich also need help. They're going to be running this world in many ways. And they have to know how to think. They have to know that it's possible to read The Scarlet Letter and like it, that it's possible to read, all these books and understand them, and that they're not mysteries, and that they, and
Or what about, it's possible to have a world that's more kind, more loving, more peaceful? Because when I think of Ginsburg, when I think of the counterculture and the Beats and the Woodstock generation, that's what comes to mind. I just noticed something today, which I hadn't noticed before, just walking around Hoboken and seeing these people with the Apple, what do you call them, earpods. And I said to someone online at the bus stop, not the Bluetooth, the white thing, right? It's like this conformist thing that everybody has these white thing. It almost looks like somebody they're beaming down from another planet, that all of this computerized thing, and again, like getting away from literature. Literature teaches us complexity, it teaches us compassion, and how can we maybe utilize this love of Ginsburg maybe to get people excited about literature again?
well, okay, and one of the great things about poetry in particular is that it's an aural art. It's of the ear, and you can put the sounds, and kids do understand. They understand listening to beats. They listen to the hip hop kind of rhyming that goes on, and so they're kind of tuned into words. And then I try to show them, well, let's look at this. Okay, let's look at Walt Whitman then, and something, and let's read it out loud, hear it. And what are you hearing? Are you hearing consonants? Are you hearing, alliteration? What are you hearing? I'm sorry, I'm hitting your mic, but okay, but I'm not trying to beat you up. And and what I learned about reading literature is that reading it's physical. That we just don't read with our minds. We read with our whole bodies. And sometimes when I'm reading, I feel indigestion. What's going on? And I'll mark the paragraph. I'll go back to it. I won't stop. And then I'll go, what? Oh, God, there's a character change there. There's a character development, or there's a narrational shift, or there's some analytic, English mumbo jumbo that you can use. But it was indigestion that pointed me to it. And that's why I said everybody's going to have a different tell, whether it's an eyebrow itching or whatever. And you have to read yourself as you read. And then you're going to know which parts to go into the book to give you a little evidence for your essays that you have to write in high school, and then you come up with original analysis using the tool pack of not plot so much, but character, or or narration, or symbolism, or all those analytic.
Right.
But they're tools. They're not those. They're not the ends. Those are the means. And
So there's that, but there's also reader response theory. Now, I went to NYU. I went to a program at NYU which was considered one of the best programs of its kind in the world at that time. It was founded by Louise Rosenblatt, who very few people know of. It's okay to say you don't know of her. Okay, she was a roommate of Margaret Mead's at Barnard, and then she went on she studied anthropology in her undergraduate. Then she went over to Paris to the Sorbonne, and she got a doctorate degree in comparative literature. And then she hung around people like André Gide, Marcel Duchamp. She come back to New York, and she wrote a book called Literature as Exploration, which links the study of literature to democracy. She's the only person who's ever made that link. And she has been both lionized and marginalized. She founded this program at NYU in 1947, which I attended in the mid-90s. I was taught by Gordon Pradle, who was a student of Louise Rosenblatt. So I inculcate my students in this democratic pedagogy that it's the conversations that happen in literature classes strengthen our democracy, because it allows us to agree, to disagree, to look at the nuances, to look at the different shades of meaning, and then you could take those skills.
So they're competing forms of correct.
Yeah, it's not right or wrong. It's like let's liberate the classroom. So my English classrooms are very liberating. I grow and change from my teaching. I walk out of my classroom on a cloud.
Well, if you're not changing, you're not teaching. Right. I mean, and I think there's an all-in nature to teaching. Totally, that every class you have to learn something from. And every time you read, even if you teach the same book every year, it's not the same experience.
I tell my students I would pay to do this. I tell them, I said, first of all, I'm not getting paid. They're giving me un gats, as the Italians say, right? They throw you a few shekels when you teach, but you teach because it's a craft, it's a profession, you believe in it, all right? It's humanizing for the students and for you. It's transformative. And if I was independently wealthy, I would pay for the privilege of teaching.
I'm glad you're saying that, because I find teachers are kind of maligned in our society. And, teachers at a party will say, well, what do you do? It's, well, I'm a plumber. Right. Because it's about making money. Right. The plumber makes more than the teacher. And so that's better. And but I know some very literate plumbers, too, so that's okay. But, I agree with you. I think teaching is noble. And it's something that, so Allen was a very gifted teacher, and because he had this quality, he had this ability to talk to, not so much to your face, but talk to the inner bodhisattva that's deep somewhere in you. And he's talking to you, and you're feeling it. I mean, not for me, because I'm not a tzaddik like Allen, who was a wise man and a powerful man that way, and he could actually get into people, understand. So he could open people up and into his teachings, and also he would always teach that he quoted Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche that first thought, best thought, right? And everybody said, that means you don't revise. He said, no. First thought is the you are thought that goes before what you write. So you write something, and then you work it back to its beginning. So you revise, but you revise back to the source of the word itself, and that's where it takes all that, and then it accumulates all that meaning and possibility, that makes it special. That anyway, so that's kind of a Ginsbergian kind of teaching, and he was very. He was also an encouraging teacher. He wasn't. He was. That's the way he was in person. He was humble. He was humble and not humble. He understood how smart he was, but he didn't make you suffer that. he honored you. He looked for whatever wisdom you have, and in fact, he was really good at sucking it out of you. And he would make use of it. Even when my younger son was like probably a preteen listening to hip hop, he said, "Well, give me the lyrics, give me the words," and all of a sudden he picked up 5 or 6 new slang words that he read into his poetry, and accurately too. So he had such a good ear. Anyways, but I think teaching, that's why I think for me to go from working for Allen and then to teaching was a natural progression. And
what do you think happened to the 60s? We had this great time in our history where we were going to do great things. We went to the moon. There was dreams of peace and love, and war is over if you want it. And then all of a sudden, 1980 comes, Reagan gets in, everybody's back to work, put on the red power tie, and the hippies become yuppies, okay? Did this happen? I know, I was 1963 I was born, so I was a little too young.
So, in the 70s, but yeah. The thing about the 60s is that what most people forget is it was terrifying. It was pure terror. I was afraid of going to Vietnam. I had a very low draft number. I was number 1 after college. I was all the leaders that I admired in this country were killed. Well, not just presidents, but Medgar Evers or Fred Hampton, or it goes on and on. There hasn't been another time period when so many leaders of society have been killed as the 60s. So yeah, smoke some dope and listen and invent rock and roll, because it's a lot better than being just worried about being killed in Vietnam. Yeah. And also the other thing is, all the kids were in colleges for the draft deferments, which bolstered the student money, and that's why rock and roll became big. They had every college had all their rock bands, and they had lots of money for it from all the students that were there. So it was a great flourishing, both of fear and of this feeling of togetherness. And I think I met some hippies once, but only once. And I really think they were giving food out at a free concert in Iowa. And then after that, everybody was freaks. They were like a speed freak or this.
Wavy gravy.
Well, yeah, I don't know Wavy that much, but yeah. But I mean,
was that with that van that went across the country, and it was a traveling circus of some kind. Ken Kesey.
Further bus, but right, and that bus is in a museum now. And that's what's happened to the 60s. It's a museum. So Woodstock is a movie. And
Tom Wolfe, the electric Kool-Aid acid test.
Right. And I mean, see, but that was right, and that's important change in writing. New journalism is a really interesting result, because I think that's what affects me as a writer most, is when I wrote in the 70s, when I first moved to New York, I was cleaning houses. When I realized I wanted to be a poet, it liberated me from having a career. And I would just work any job just to be able to write. Working messenger, or work in a bar, or and.
Well, real quick, why don't we do like a Bob Rosenthal 101 in terms of your upbringing, in terms of what brought you to literature and Allen?
Okay. Well, in Iowa, I first met poets for the first time.
You grew up in Iowa, born in Iowa. Oh.
In the wealthy suburbs of Chicago, North Side. And I met poets in Iowa. I was lucky because I didn't get into my safe school, which was University of Illinois. And so I went to Iowa, which had a lot of radicalism. In fact, the head of SDS is really a great, well-known American poet, Michael Lally, who was, and I remember him from then. And so I met poets there and got interested. And when I was 21, I went to a cottage in northern Wisconsin up on a lake that my grandfather had built in the 20s. And my poet friend came up, and I had a low-level kind of spiritual revelation of understanding that I could be a writer. And if I was a writer, I wouldn't have to have a career, like I said. I wouldn't have to.
A real job, as they say. Or
The real job.
something boring, or that you know,
It allowed
like.
me to live with my girlfriend, who I'm still married to. I mean, it allowed me to become relaxed about who I am. And when I went back, I had transferred to Chicago, and then I met poets at the University of Chicago, University of Illinois in Chicago, Circle Campus, and they knew of the poet Ted Berrigan, who is a New York School poet from New York, and he was coming to Chicago, and they said, we're going to go meet him. And we became friends, and you know, and Ted very much, he was married then to the poet Alice Notley, who is a very powerful and well-published poet today. And he said, you gotta come to New York. Right. That's where, that he said, you know, Ted said.
Ginsburg and the Beats were far from your consciousness at that time? Or?
I'd never read Allen. Okay. I'd seen him on TV in Chicago, and it was like early color TV, so he was chartreuse. You know, he was on the Irv Kupcinet show, and during the Chicago '68 convention. And so it was a very heated kind of discussion going on, but it was very, and so I knew him as a cultural. I had him on my wall in a dormitory. I put his head on the body of Raquel Welch, and I have a note saying, well, how would Allen Ginsberg like to have the body of Raquel Welch? You know, but I didn't know who he was, and I never read his poetry. But I started to read the New York School poets, James Schuyler and Ashbery and Koch and Berrigan and all these other poets. And so when I moved to my wife and I moved to New York just to be poets, and we went to the East Village. It was cheap. That was 1973. That was New York drop dead kind of time, you know.
Jerry Ford, right? Ford to City, drop dead.
Ford to City, that was the Post. No, the Daily News.
Daily News, yeah.
Daily News headline. And New York, it was dirty. There was crime. There was everything. And it was a great place to live because the food was cheap. You know, just First Avenue here, there's not even a fruit stand left. There used to be 5 on every block. You know, you didn't need a refrigerator. You could just go out and buy your food that day and make it.
Fourth Avenue had bookstores.
There were so many bookstores. There was Italian food. You didn't have to. You didn't have to buy a Ronzoni spaghetti. You could get fresh pasta on the corner, you know, and fresh mozzarella, and all of a sudden, like, food tasted good. So I think it was the East Village was a human garden, and that's
very different today, folks. Now the East Village and much of the village has become gentrified to the point where we don't even recognize it. Where they got the things coming out of the ears. You go to the cafes; they're not talking poetry. They're talking hedge funds and real estate and this kind of thing, and dogs. Yes, correct. So I really think that this may be the last bastion of Bohemia, right here in this office, Bob, right here.
So I'm of two minds. I think, first of all, how lucky I was to be in New York in the 70s when there were 20 or 30 young poets my age, all living in this same neighborhood. And we did mimeograph books together. We wrote plays together. We did everything. Now, somebody worked for the Strand, somebody read for the blind, somebody did, everybody had crummy jobs. But we were all getting along, but we were all publishing each other. And the publishing boom was over in the 70s, so we were doing mimeography, and those books now are valuable that we made and just gave away, and but we never really got published by the big publishers. A couple of us became well known, and Eileen Miles is a very well known writer among us, and Charles Bernstein is also a very, very successful writer, I would say, in all ways. And I say for myself, I still stayed in the traditions of the East Village. I wrote poems. I would read them at St. Mark's Church. I have little books of poetry. I would do things, and I also what I really realized was I came to New York to be the next Frank O'Hara. That's who I wanted to be.
Okay. What was it about Frank O'Hara?
Oh, just love his ease, the colloquial urbanity, the ease with which he can throw in all these loosely assorted items and then have it all make sense in the last line. It was just a very difficult thing to do, and Berrigan could do it too. But if you look at Frank's "The Day Lady Died," the famous poem about the death of Billie Holiday, and he talks about going down buying Strega, going by buying the paper, and then at the 5 spot, which was here down in the village too. Listening to her, leaning on the John door as she whispered across to the keyboard to Mal Waldron, and then I saw the newspaper with the headline on it, and just unbelievably moving, and it's all those little facts, all those little things fall together, and poems are like machines. They have all these little moving parts, and they have to come together. If it's going to be a good poem, it has to come together, at some point. Anyway, so I want it to be like Frank O'Hara. One is who one is. I am blessed that I got to have a life associated with poetry, and whether I'm a poet in my own neighborhood, I'm a minor wise guy poet in my own neighborhood, and I got to work with Allen Ginsberg, who was not my idol, but became my idol on many other levels. And poetry maybe being one of the last to come through, but as a person, I admired him so much. As a person who lived his life of a true life of penury and generosity, and he gave I was hired to write letters. If I wrote a letter to Mario Cuomo, he would write back. Of course, it was Allen signing the letter. So if Allen writes Mario Cuomo a letter, he gets an answer. But Allen can write a lot more letters if I'm helping him to write them. So I learn a few Buddhist buzzwords, grounded, mindful, and I slip those in, and then Allen would correct a little bit, and I retype it, and so I felt powerful that way, that I was adding that we could address issues, and.
So, in terms of Allen Ginsburg and embracing a life of dignified poverty, as you say, let me look into the camera and say that Allen Ginsburg would not have become a business major. He would not have done something like that. He would, he was like today when we look at the young people, we look at the selling out, we look at studying marketing, that becomes the #1 major, and where is that leading us as a country? I think that it's what got us Donald Trump in the White House, this kind of mentality.
Absolutely. Well, the kind of, although know-nothingism, as you say, is a very old American tradition. Right. And I don't know that the know-nothings are greater today or less than they always have been there, perhaps. And maybe it's always been there. But I think you're right. When we were in college to learn, because we didn't want to go into the war, but also we were there to learn. It seemed, yes, we're in humanities, and eventually, and it used to be humanities was the gateway into advertising. It was the gateway into law. It's the gateway even into medicine. It's be the better person before you become the doctor. So you're the better doctor in the end. That's why all lawyers and doctors are all authors in the end too. But and then everybody's got the bug to make a lot of money. And of course, after the late 70s, after 77, real estate prices start to rebound, go up, and all of a sudden you can't move to New York anymore. You can't be part of an art community. And that's a problem. There is no art community in the East Village.
There's a movie out called The Lost Village, folks. I want people to know there's a movie called The Lost Village. It's a documentary film made by Roger Paradiso, who's a friend of mine who actually I work with him on this movie as the story editor. And I think it's the first movie that actually documents the death of the village as a Bohemia. It's called The Lost Village, okay? So it shows you that it names the problem of the destruction of the Bohemia, which I think you need need to do if you're going to go forward and reclaim it and revive it. We've already made one show called Bohemian Revival, where we had two writers. This was in Penn South, which is another kind of a redoubt of that downtown culture. This was a housing project for the labor movement at one time, but full of intellectual energy and Marxists and stuff like that, and we had that. But here we're in another repository of that lost age of Bohemia. And Bob, if we could, I just want to walk around this wonderful room and show things so our audience can see, like, what a Bohemian space really, an authentic Bohemian space looks like.
Get up.
Yes.
I'd like to say something about the building we're in.
Yes.
Is really a famous art building. The whole we're on the 5th floor. The whole 6th floor was owned by the painter Larry Rivers. He ended up owning the building. This apartment we're in now used to be owned by Klaus Oldenburg. And we have
405 East 13th Street.
a famous painter is in the Venice Biennale, lives downstairs. Thomas Burckhardt, who's a painter, is the son of Rudy Burckhardt, a painter, and Yvonne Jacquet. And so we have lots of painters here, and in fact, I remember coming to incredible parties in this very apartment.
Really?
Yeah, which I can't tell you about. But
We've got to do another show on parties, okay? We have to do a whole other show. But when you mention Klaus Oldenburg, that connects to my biography, because when I discovered Judson Memorial Church in 1999, that was a significant moment for my evolution intellectually, spiritually, culturally, and socially, because Oldenburg used to go there along with Yoko Ono and Rauschenberg, and that was always sort of a hotbed of that downtown culture.
political radical.
Allen would have loved it. I'm sure he was there.
Often was there.
Yeah.
And you could do organizing there. You needed a hall that was available. Yeah. No, Judson, and so that's, see, with Allen, there's always a need to do something. Ernesto Cardenal is visiting. Let's get him a reading. Where? Oh, we know Dory Ashton at the Cooper Union. Well, Allen knows Dory Ashton. I call for Allen, and I get the Great Hall of the Cooper Union for Ernesto Cardenal, with 920 seats filled, and all the Sandinistas doing security. It was amazing. There were people all around there. It was so cool. And afterwards, the politicals took me to dinner, because they did a lot of work, and they said, "We want to thank you for your work." And I said, "Oh, no, I was so happy to do this." No, we're thanking you for your work. And I said, "No, I would have done." And they said, "No, we are thanking you for your work." And I said, "Okay, got it." Wow. Communists.
Okay, all right. Wow. Well, let's walk around this room and let's see what we got here. Okay, cool. Okay. Good.
Allen, the three fish. It's a design he saw when he lived in India. It's I think it's a Carnatic design, but and it's called Buddha's Footprint. And if you look, and I'm going to just try to find a Ginsberg book right now.
Okay.
I'll show you. Where's a view of Ginsberg? Do we have any? Where's the poetry? Does it have it in it? There it is. And so he used it, and we put it on the on his checks too.
Who is that gentleman over there with the long hair and the beard?
Okay. This is a photograph. This is a photograph of Nanao Sakaki, a Japanese poet. He's actually Okinawan. During World War II, he was actually outside Nagasaki, and he traced the bombers coming in. And after World War II, he gave up all his money, and with just a couple yen in his pocket, walked the whole island of Japan a couple times and picked up all sorts of little followers. And he became a poet. He's a poet, and he lived up in these kind of hippie communities up in the mountains. They're really cool. He's a good friend of Gary Snyder's, and Allen met Nanao through Snyder, but he's a wonderful poet. And I remember once he came up to get Allen's key and from my house, and he had to climb up 5th floor walk up. He comes up, he says, New York Mountain.
Cool.
No, he's a great guy, and so this is Allen's portrait.
This wonderful picture here of Allen with Erica Jong and James
I
Baldwin.
really don't know the provenance on that. Allen's got no beard, so that's mid-70s. That's probably like around the time of the Rolling Thunder. That's when he shaved his beard off. Otherwise, he really wasn't without a beard.
But you could see the party scenes going on there.
Yeah, and it could be it's probably a literary party.
Okay.
Could be an American Academy of Arts and Letters kind of party, because that would have Baldwin and Jong and everybody. Yeah. So I don't know though. I don't know the provenance.
Okay. Let's look around. Look at all these shelves over here, full of archives. What's this archival material?
Yeah, I'm going to show you one interesting thing. You asked earlier.
Yeah.
About whether we'd make an Allen Ginsburg museum.
Yes.
So he clearly said, don't make a museum out of me.
Okay.
But here it is.
Whoa. Okay. Oh my, careful. Oh, easy. Okay.
When we moved out of 12th Street to 13th Street, there was all these tchotchkes around. So I just threw them in this empty toolbox and never touched them. And then afterwards, I realized this is the Allen Ginsburg Museum.
Okay, there it is.
These are things he picked up around the world. Money. Wow. Here's a roach clip.
A roach clip, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
From the 60s, probably. Okay. Here's another one, a little more medical.
Okay.
Here's...
What's on this rock here? What is
somebody
it?
gave it to him.
Okay.
The moon is a plate of snow laid on a table of night or something. Anyways, okay. Not sure. So Allen wouldn't know what to do with it, so he put it somewhere.
Okay.
You have his sunglasses. Here's his gold tie, which he
the gold tie.
Which he did punk rock. You are my.
Can I unroll the gold tie? The famous Allen Ginsburg gold tie.
Remember skinny ties?
Yes. Okay. Cool.
I'm going to roll it the other way now. So.
Okay. And, what is this image here? Look at this one.
There's
things that he found.
No.
His grandparents.
Yeah. There it's got his father's watch here.
He grew up in Newark?
He was born in Newark and raised in Patterson.
How old was he when he moved to Patterson?
I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not exactly sure, but I think most of his adolescence was in Patterson. His father taught at Patterson High.
Oh, okay.
He was the English teacher at Patterson High for decades. All of New Jersey knows Louis Ginsburg.
Louis Ginsburg.
Oh my God.
Okay. But I want to say a little serendipity about me today, because today, this is August, I'm an English professor, and I don't have a gig for the fall, so I'm scrambling around looking to get a gig. Where do I go today? I went to Rutgers University in Newark, and guess what? I got a gig.
Oh, congratulations.
I got a gig in Newark, so I said, thank you, Allen Ginsburg, for...
Is it full-time or part-time?
No, it's an adjunct. It's a position... Actually, it's working in the education department, sort of as a consultant with teachers of literature in the high school, and I'll be
curriculum. Oh.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, I'd love to talk to you even more about that.
Sure.
But anyway, I call this coins of the realm. It's just all the coins. He was traveling all over the world, and he just threw all the coins in a bag. Anyways. So
there it is, folks, the Allen Ginsburg Museum, an exclusive for Public Voice Salon.
There you go. Here, rowan berries. This is Allen's handwriting. Rowan berries from Boris Pasternak's grave, Peredelinko. Peredel Kino, I think. I'm not sure. Okay. And it's from 1985. And they even signed it, Allen Ginsburg. Rowan berries.
Okay. Is that an Allen Ginsburg game over there, or toy? What is that Allen Ginsburg toy?
Okay, let me close up the museum.
Closing the museum for now. Okay. Visiting hours are over.
The Japanese love Allen.
The Japanese love Allen. Okay.
Japanese. So a lot of these things are built by Japanese toy makers.
Let's show it to the camera. Yeah.
This is. Yeah. Let's see. This might be it.
Let me see that. Okay.
Yeah, that looks like it.
We could show this to the camera. Allen Ginsburg toy.
Here he is.
Okay. Oh, there it is. There it
All
is.
of America in his hand. Whoops.
Oh, the hat fell off. Hold on. Uncle Sam hat for Allen. Okay. There it is. Okay.
And he's got beads. Now I don't know how many. It should be a mala string, so it should have 108 beads on it. I don't think it's accurate that way. But he's got the coat and tie. Yeah, Allen, after his father died, he put on a coat and tie.
Oh, interesting.
A
Okay.
used coat and a used tie.
Okay. Quick look into that corner over there, and we have this very famous personage there. This man over here who was
Up here in the
quite into the drug scene as well, right?
William Burroughs.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's a friend of ours who makes portraits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the triptych of Burroughs. This is a painting by Burroughs,
Okay.
and then this is the poet Gregory Corso,
Oh, there he is. Let's get a close-up of Gregory Corso if we can.
and that's in Allen's old apartment on 12th Street.
Okay. 12th and.
It was 12th and B,
Okay.
and yeah, there you can see the sink. I mean, now that apartment goes for $5,000 a month. And
Hedge fund operator working. Now, what about this spiritual image here?
That's a Hieronymus Bosch painting called the Garden of Earthly Delights. And so you have heaven, earth, and hell.
Okay.
And that was, I think it's from Allen's childhood. I'm not sure, but it was always around. The odd thing is that when I was in high school, I too bought this print.
Really?
So I have this in my bedroom, the same
A little synchronicity.
There's some-
May I take this over here? May I show this to the public? This is not X-rated. This is yeah. Okay.
It's I think it's Gregory and Allen. It's called Modest.
Okay. What's the story?
They're being less modest.
Less modest. We can't show that one. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
you probably could. I
Okay.
don't think it's. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any parts of the body that haven't been seen a lot.
Right. Look at this beautiful, this abstract image over here. Maybe just explain what that is. Okay.
This is an Avedon
Show the Avedon.
of Allen's whole family.
Oh, look at that.
So there's Louis Ginsburg
Louis Ginsburg, the English teacher.
and lyric poet, published
I see.
in the New York Times, which
Wow.
Allen never got to do. Never got poetry.
Never.
In the
The
magazine.
Gray Lady never honored this man? Oh, my God. Now I don't feel so bad because the Gray Lady always rejects my op-ed essays.
Brother Eugene,
Okay.
who also wrote poetry.
Okay.
Now, I don't know everybody, and these are all of Eugene's children. Actually, that's repeated again. Allen once told me he went to a party at the top of the World Trade Center, I think, back then. And he looked around, he said, every other person was an idiot. And he means it
Yes.
in a very, not in a derogatory way, but in kind of the Dostoevskian way, the idiot, and everybody was, because that was Allen's, and I love it too.
Love Dostoevsky?
He loved the idiot, and he loved
Oh, yes.
particular, because Michigan
Yes.
is like Allen. Michigan, everybody loves
Brings
Michigan.
people together somehow.
But he ruins their lives.
Does he?
Yeah, he ruins everybody's life. And he's just the same at the end. He's unchanged. It's a really interesting book. But
Yes. Okay.
and so Allen was like that. He was everybody. He was nice to everybody, and yet he was always getting into trouble with people too.
Stirring the pot. Stirring the pot.
That's right, exactly.
And this beautiful image right here.
And that's a painting by Simon Carr,
Okay.
who's the son of Lucian Carr.
Okay.
And that this is during an abstract period. Allen liked this painting. So we're actually, I have to get a little higher up. I have to get up and hang it up better.
Okay.
But it's one thing, Allen bought it to help support Simon in his artistic life. And, do we have...
Well, just real quick, I want to show this. I have to show this. This is Grove Press. Can you get that, baby? Grove Press. Very, very, very significant in my life because Grove Press, they published chapter 1 of my book, My Life as a Novel, which is a nonfiction book, but Barney Rossett was around when they got that, and they published it in their online edition. This was in 2009, so that's...
Fred, what is his last name? He always worked at Grove. Fred... It'll come back to me.
Grove published everybody. They published Kerouac and Mailer and Ginsberg, right? Yeah.
Right, Genet, right, and all the French guys, and and yeah, I mean, I grew up.
I feel honored to be in that company.
My father had a copy of the Olympia Reader in his nightstand. Yes, so I read a lot of sections of purloined sections from the Olympia Press, which is an offshoot of Grove.
And Grove had the great honor of being denounced in the halls of Congress by Jerry Ford for daring to put a picture of a nude woman next to Richard Nixon. And then he said, "This is pornographic," and
yeah, well,
yeah.
See, and that's the kind of Ford is an old character who grew up in a time when the female body was pornographic, and and now I don't know.
Yeah. Let's take a look quickly in the hallway now. I want to see. We have 3 minutes left, but we want to take a quick look here because we want to give honor to Mr. Jack Kerouac here, and let's see here, Claudia. Are you with us? Okay, here we go. All right, are we filming now, sweetie? We're filming now. This is the hallway, and there it says "Dig It." It says "Dig It." There's Jack Kerouac.
This was in the elevator at the Walker Art Center when they did a big beach show, and Allen said, "Hey, can I have the poster when you're done?" So they sent it to us.
And there's Kerouac over there. You see him?
That's on East 7th Street in 1953.
Wonderful. Let's sit back down for just 2 minutes and just sort of conclude this wonderful visit. And yes, thank you. Okay. Yes. Time flies, boy, when you're having fun. It's really, wow.
Back in the 80s, this is what New York was looking like, when, it was garbage everywhere. This had been a old bus garage, and the Allen's house was down there, and it was a crack haven and everything. Here's Ted Berrigan in Chicago with Bob and my wife Shelley and their little boy, Anselm Berrigan, who today is his 47th birthday, and there's Alice Notley.
And who is this here, up here?
Oh, this is, that's
who's the blonde?
I'm sorry, it's a boyfriend.
Okay.
I forget which guy is, and Alan, and you know him from the actor.
Oh, he looks familiar, yeah.
And I'm having a junior moment.
He'll come to us.
Yeah, blue velvet.
Okay.
Anyways.
All right, let's sit down and just wrap this. Yes. Okay, I can't believe how quickly this hour went. When you're with somebody who's interesting, who has cultural knowledge, and you're talking about these times that really mattered in our history, time just flies, okay? Rob, we would love you to come back in the future to be our guest and, continue this ongoing education project of learning about literature and also this incredible time in American culture that I think still matters, and I'm not so sure it went away by itself. I think there were political forces that kind of put the kibosh on that. But anyway,
I would say maybe the culture, maybe the bohemian nature of the lifestyle is gone, but Allen's place in time is secure. I think I believe he's right there with Walt Whitman, and I think he's people. And yes, he's been an answer on Jeopardy for decades. He still comes up. So it's So people, they still will use Allen as a referent for a time period.
Yes.
And
when you think counterculture, you think Ginsburg. On our show, whenever we mention the 60s, we found there's an image online of him in Washington Square Park, and there's like a poetry reading going on, and it's like this iconic image.
Well, I think, and it's interesting too that like Scorsese really loves Allen, because in the 2 Dylan movies done, he's featured Allen, and in the movie of the Rolling Thunder, he ends it with Allen making a wonderful improvised statement to wrap up what the whole meaning of their experiences, and that everybody can build their own, make something for themselves out of their lives, and it's so empowering. And that's where Allen is just magical when he hits. And I didn't nail it down. I don't have it in front of me. But what he says at the end of that movie is incredible. And
Well, this has been a messy dialogue here, purposely messy, and I'm glad it's been very interactive back and forth. But one thing I'm sort of circling back to the beginning of our talk when you mentioned Allen's candor. And I'm thinking now about a time when we talk about fake news, when we have a President Trump who has lied. Everything out of his mouth is a lie. So Allen Ginsberg is almost like an antidote to these highly corporatized, everybody's a salesperson, they're trying to sell you something, and we can't know the truth in our media anymore, you know. He almost seems like a real antidote for our times.
I mean, I certainly, when Allen was gone, I felt less safe in the world. And I felt he was as if he was like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. And when he dies, the floodgates open. And 9/11, it's all before 9/11. It's before cell phones. It's before everything. You know, it's just, he's just on the cusp of this big change. And yet all that he says and all that he wrote, his observations, his acuity is still really valid. You know, it doesn't depend on technology. And so I think that's the lesson. And if anything else, and I promised Allen that I would write about him, and I promise, and
This is your first book? Is this your first book? Or no, you've written?
I want to show you this book. This is my first prose book, and it's from 1977, and it's about cleaning houses. It's subject-oriented based. I told Allen I want to write about him, but make it be like this book, funny, and informational. And this book is also subject-based. So there's a chapter on his generosity. There's a chapter on, on the Bodhisattva. There's.
Before we close this, though, I gotta give a shout out to my darling wife, Claudia Canasto Chibuki, who's from South America, who's from a little town outside Bogota, Colombia. She's one of those wonderful Latinas with 3 names, and I love her dearly, and if without her help and love and support, the show wouldn't exist. Love is still the answer, as they said back in the 60s when Allen Ginsberg was in his peak, and we thank you so much, Bob Rosenthal. You're doing more to keep alive the memory of Allen Ginsberg than anybody, and we really do thank you.
I hope we get to talk again.
This is a beginning.
Okay. Be well.
Okay.